Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle Desrochers and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday night segment of The Outer Realm. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 from the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM from New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been a part of our journey since the very beginning. So thank you, Folgers. It wouldn't be the same without you, nor would we want to do it without you. Just saying. We're truly grateful for Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, aka Justin Snicker, for the contribution of his time, his music, and his voice for the intro that you just heard. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on all of your favorite music streaming platforms. Also, big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind the banners and logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Also specializes in the horror genre. See where I'm going with that? We love that stuff over here. Anyway, does great commission pieces of all sorts, including pet paintings. I know, big contrast, but he does amazing stuff. We are really excited to talk about, I'm totally having a brain shoot, so why don't I just go ahead and put this up right here. Hold on. I just want to show this. Okay. Contact and Disclosure Symposium 2024 on April the 20th at the Off-World Bar in Toronto this Saturday. So check them out at contactanddisclosuresymposium.com. Get your tickets, check out the guests, and go see what they're all about. It's going to be the very first one. So we're really pleased to be a sponsor of this brand new event. Okay, second year in a row, the Halifax Paranormal Symposium on October 12, 2024 at the Halifax Tower Hotel and Conference Center. So check out ppri.net at Halifax Paranormal Symposium for your tickets and guest information as well. So second year in a row for us. We're very excited about it. Elliot Van Dusen, who is putting this shindig on, and of course is the director of PPRN, is one of the hosts here at the radio show. Catch him out every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern with Dr. Jana Greenberg, called Science and Paranormal. So bang up show. They really do a great job. And you'll hear them talking about it. He'll be the guy to get you guys all informed, shall we say. Anyway, tonight we welcome back our dear friend. I mean, I have to say, it's just not just so much a dear friend. Preston's like family, pretty much. We always, kind of joke around about that. Frequent flyer miles. That's definitely Preston with us, and we love having him on. He's going to be discussing his newest book, Not From Around Here, Volume 5. I know. We'll get ready for some really awesome Preston stories because here they are. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. Not bad. Can't complain. I do anyway, but I'm doing good.
There we go. This is for you. Can I get a shout out? Hello, Preston and Michelle from New Zealand. Hello, Jagan Thompson. Hello. There we go. Oh boy. Just look, it's not just me who loves you, Preston. Look at all these people just chiming in. I know. This is great. We'll just pop them up. And so you have a new book upcoming. Has it been released yet?
Yeah, it's a brand new book. Here, I'll pop it up since I have control. There it is. Not From Here, Volume 5.
I love it. Anunnaki.
Exactly.
I love it.
It's funny because the previous 4 volumes each had a different type of ET. First was a gray, then a praying mantis, human looking, a reptilian.
Right.
Now, it's kind of out of ideas. So I'm talking.
It's pretty cool.
And Dolly's like, how about an Anunnaki? Dolly Saffron, of course, being the subject
Dolly.
of symmetry. We all know Dolly.
Dolly. I know. I always break out in song with
Don't do that. I've never done that to her. I knew a girl named Jude, and I never did it. I never said, "Hey, Jude."
I know, right? She knows I can't help it, though. I really do try. I just really can't. So, but I love the cover, actually, because a lot of people, who may not even follow along a whole lot with aliens or different extraterrestrial races, everybody seems to know the Anunnaki. They seem to think this is where it all began. Whether it did or didn't, it fascinates me as to how many people are actually aware of who the Anunnaki actually are. So the beautiful cover.
Yeah, I'm very pleased with it. My
The
sister-in-law did it. Yeah, Kisara. She does most of my books. And we actually gave her good representation from an ancient statue. Well, Dolly went through all of them. She's like, well, this one's closest. Let's give her this one.
Right.
So, yeah, she definitely spruced it up a little bit.
Right.
Put the little fancy colors around it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's largely accurate.
Yeah, I love it. I think it was a great choice. If you're going to get to a point where you're going to run out pretty soon.
I know. Well, it's going to be the last volume for a while because I've kind of these volumes are basically drawn from my articles that I've written over 35 years now.
Wow.
And I had a couple left. So actually this book has a feature none of the others have. It's largely new. Most of them are brand new stuff.
Right.
But I love exploring those weirder aspects, the unexplored dark avenues that other researchers wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. I did a chapter on alien anal probes because people keep talking on that.
Right.
Fine, I will go there. I'm gonna go there.
I love it.
So I did a big analysis on that.
That's going to answer a lot of buddy questions. Because did you notice, is it just me? But I think people are really fixated on that.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because it's not a big part of the onboard experience. It certainly happens. Right. I thought, I'll dive deep, pun intended.
I was going to say, you're setting me up, aren't you?
I want to take a look seriously because it's serious for those who go through it. And I did not expect, I didn't find that many reports. I found maybe 10 or 20. So it's not a huge part of this.
Right.
And it got really popular for some reason. I think because of the South Park show, which introduced that with their episode. Poor Kenny gets probed.
You're not wrong.
Partly, Whitley Strieber did talk about it. He had that experience. I know John Mack had a case. It comes up.
Yes.
No, not a lot of cases. It's just a colonoscopy. Honestly, that's all it is, as near as I can tell.
I wouldn't do that either. Oh my God. No, I know. Some people are just really funny about, certain parts of their anatomy, but I think it's because it's such, for some people, because this is where I had a real tough time, is because it's intrusive that you are in your safe zone. And, a lot of people get taken right from their homes or their bedrooms, and it's where you're supposed to feel safe. So when you throw that in the mix, it's really an intrusion. And I think people just put the two together, and it's just like, no, you come in here, you kidnap me, and you do this to me, and for
the number one complaint for sure.
Yeah,
a sense of loss of control. And
right.
I think honestly, the ETs find it a little bit confusing because most people who are having these experiences at some point believe that this was something they did allow. I'm not going to say everyone because it's just not true.
Right.
Some people do feel an absolute sense of violation from beginning to end.
Right.
But a lot don't. They seriously realize that they're getting a lot out of this experience.
Right.
And when they're healed and they're, taught how to pilot the craft and they're given warnings and given all kinds of spiritual information and have their psychic abilities boosted.
Yes.
They start to realize, this is not as bad as I thought.
Right.
At the beginning, it's most people are not happy campers.
No, not everybody gets to remember everything. Like, I started really associating things I went through in my childhood. But I mean, especially my fascination for the stars and the stories my grandfather would tell me about, and into adulthood, all this like floodgates open up, and all of this started coming forward. And it's, I think it was due to my being uncomfortable with it, what we were just talking about, not the anal probing part, just saying, but, but the boudoir entry, we're supposed to feel safe, and, and once I got comfortable with it, then it was a game changer. And this is what I love about the stuff that you write and document. They are always more, for the most part, I would say 95% lighthearted, and show a really nice side to everything in a time where everything is just so fear-based.
Yeah. I've been accused of being an alien lover, a UFO apologist.
Wow.
Basically talking only about benevolent cases, and it's just not true. I do not edit people's accounts. I'm very, I make a great effort to be factual and report just what people are reporting. It's their experience. It's not my job to edit it.
Right.
So I can tell you, this is what people are telling me. And I know that there's some scary stories out there. And I know there are some researchers who are hell-bent on saying this is bad.
Right.
And their research overall is very fear-based. And I question it.
Well, why do you think that is? Like, why would they want to do that? I mean,
a couple of reasons. I think one, they're flat-out agents, working for what we would call the secret government.
Right.
Another would be that they themselves are just fear-based.
Right.
They've had a lot of fear surrounding this, because some of these people are doing hypnosis.
Right.
And when you're doing hypnosis and you already have a pretty, kind of a thought about what's going on.
Right.
You don't ask about the spiritual aspects. You don't ask about, what did you get anything good out of this? You know what I mean? I talked to someone who went to a very famous researcher, and she told me flat out, he took out all the spiritual stuff. It's not in the book. I'm really mad because my experience was misrepresented. It wasn't bad. And it was portrayed as bad. And I have to tell you, I went on a couple of TV shows. I talked about one guy who was, not pulled on board so much. He believes he was taken to an underground area. He saw rock walls. And he says, he's a pilot, a doctor, and a really smart guy. And he described his experience to me, and I went on TV with it, and I explained the whole thing. And they portrayed it fairly accurately, but then I'm off camera and they're doing the voiceover, and they said that this witness fears for his life every day. I'm like, what? I did not say that. He did not say that. That was a flat out lie.
Right.
I was on another TV show, same darn thing. They basically edited my words up and said that ETs are coming to invade. And I had trouble for that recently. Someone said, look at, Preston has changed his mind. He said ETs were going to invade, and now he's saying no. I'm like, no. Look at the show again. I never said that.
Right. Putting words in my mouth. Right.
I've learned to be very careful now when going on TV. I'm always nervous.
You're preaching to the choir.
You know what I mean?
You can be labeled pretty quick. Yeah, you have to be so careful, what you say and what comes out and ends up on the cutting room floor are two entirely different things. They can make you say anything and appear to be anything. So
I was so mad at one show. They asked me, how many people are taken on board per year, do you think, in, say, California?
Right.
I'm like, I don't know. It could probably be upwards of 1,000.
Right.
And I didn't put the question in the answer. I should have, because they asked, because they asked another question, how many per day do you think? And so I'm like, a couple maybe. It could be upwards of 10 or 12. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Right.
But that question, how many do you think per day? And there I am on TV saying, it's thousands.
Oh gosh. Yeah. See what I mean? See what I mean? Like it is really, really difficult. It's and you can't get away from that. It's like any television I've done. Okay, you're going to answer some questions. Like, you've been in the hot seat. You know what it's like. And you give them like 5 answers to every question. And it's always like the most dramatic, and like I said, the whole world thinks I run around screaming demon. Meanwhile, I'm a psychokinesis kind of girl. I'm just going to tell you, I think you're projecting a lot of that stuff. That's like, but nobody wants to hear that. I would think it would be incredible for people to have an understanding of how powerful we are as human beings, that we can project out energy that can create footsteps and doors to open and telekinesis and do these incredible things. But it's just easier for them to think that there's something more sinister. And not that it's not at times, absolutely, but it gets to be a little bit crazy. So I'm just going to back up a minute. So King James, hello. Harvesting fetuses isn't a peaceful endeavor.
Well,
yeah.
I did talk to a lady, Pat Brown, who had that experience, and she lived in fear of these grays. She actually asked for it. She went to Arizona to see some, quote, walk-ins.
Right.
And these guys were supposedly channeling ETs. And she's like, yeah, sure you are. Because the guy was speaking for the grays. He's like, I am a gray and I'm on this ship. And she's like, well, I want to go on your ships. So she drives back home to Pacoima, outside of LA. She lives in an apartment or a condominium complex, really crowded. Right. Starts having these grays coming in for like a lot of them over a period of 3 or 4 months. She lost her mind with fear. I mean, she wasn't getting any sleep. Finally, she was so exhausted. She says, if this is really happening to me, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore.
Oh boy.
Put me on your ships right now and we're going to have it out. And she woke up on the craft. And that changed her experiences. It was much more interactive. They said, listen, we're not trying to hurt you. We're trying to impart knowledge to you. Right. And they basically told her all kinds of things about past lives. Oh, she has, masculine and feminine aspects. She had a spiritual experience where they took her out of body and showed her all the negative thought forms surrounding our planet. I said, this is choking your planet. All the evil thoughts and the fear that people are putting out.
Right.
And it changed everything for her. And she says, yeah, I do feel this was positive. I still have some negative feelings.
Right.
And here's another case which blew my mind, actually. This couple from Nova Scotia, a young couple, had gotten pregnant before they wanted to. And they're like, okay, fine.
Right.
She had just moved from Europe. He was starting a business. They had just moved to this small town, which was a little more ultra religious than they would have liked. But they had red tape issues with insurance. I mean, they were having a lot going on.
Right.
Now she's pregnant. They're like, well, okay, this is good news.
Right.
And they built the nursery. They've got a midwife. They went to the doctor. They were 7.5 months along, fully verified. She sent me the photos of her, the medical records, pictures of her with her huge belly. Sweet, sweet couple. They contacted me. We're like, you're the 5th researcher we've contacted. They all just wanted the story. I'm like, listen, it's interesting as your story is. I'm just here to help you.
Right.
That's my primary purpose.
Right. Right.
So we were talking, and they explained how 7.5 months into their pregnancy, they had a weird night where there was this huge electrical storm going on outside that wasn't normal.
Right.
They're looking out the window, and there's bolts of electricity going horizontal in front of their window. This is late at night. They freaked out. This is July, a warm night. They slammed the window closed and jumped back in bed, and both went boom, straight unconscious. They were like, their hearts were beating, they were on adrenaline, and then boom, they're out. So that was weird. Number one, weird. Number two, they wake up the next morning feeling very woozy.
Wow.
She's like, gosh, I feel like I've just come out of an operation or something.
Right.
She says, honey, does my stomach look, flatter to you? He's like, no. She says, I don't think I'm pregnant. He's like, honey, you're kidding. There's no way.
Right.
And she's
Right.
like, no, I know. When I know, I know.
Yes.
Like, no, the baby was breech. We've been doing these exercises to get the baby in the right position. Sure, that's what it is. She's like, we need to go to our next appointment now. Get an ultrasound, because they were scheduled for one. And they moved it up and went to the doctor, and the doctor's like, calls in the nurse. I'm like, they're not saying anything. They're very concerned. He's like, I'm not getting a heartbeat. There's no heartbeat. And did more tests and said, well, you're not pregnant. She's like, what are you talking about? I came in here. You heard the heartbeat. He says, there must have been a mistake.
I'm as big as a house. Yeah. How do you get around that?
She had every single sign, morning sickness,
yes,
all of it.
Right.
And the doctor's like, well, there's a mistake. Heads are going to roll. We don't know what happened. He was clearly upset, the doctor.
Did they ever return the child? Because sometimes they go back and forth with them, right?
Yeah, well, here's what's interesting. He's the husband starts crying and he's upset, and she was upset too, but she says, honey, I'm actually not that upset. I know my baby is fine. I'm actually okay with this. He's like, you're kidding. No, I am okay with this.
Right.
He was a very analytical, cut and dry kind of guy.
Right.
They both did have a history of encounters in their family, but she was very spiritual, really into meditation and psychic stuff and healing, as you might expect. And I talked to her. I'm like, you're okay with this? She says, I really, really am. I'm like, okay. And yes, later she was taken on board, did see her child.
Right. Right. So was this child a hybrid, or just, was it just that they've been following the family lines for so long that they took this, this human baby? Maybe they've done it with others throughout her ancestry.
Yeah. She said the child looked normal, but I've talked to a lot of people who've had this.
Right.
One lady, she had a couple of babies with them, missing fetuses, the whole deal.
Right. Right.
Finally, she's like, what's going on? And they said, okay, we're actually done. You're going to get pregnant now, and you will keep the baby. She's like, oh, okay.
Yay. Right. Wow. So basically, you don't know. They just don't know if it was a hybrid baby, like part extraterrestrial and human, or they're just like, no, we're just going to take this little tot and observe it. And
I didn't get to do a formal interview with that part. It was the last time I talked to her. She disappeared. The husband freaked out. They had a separation, I believe.
Right.
She kind of ran off.
How do you? Yeah. I mean, that would take a very strong person or people to be able to go through something like that. I couldn't imagine. I mean, I think for her, because she knows, she feels it, she senses it, you have that connection. Maybe she has better memories because she's been taken before, meets this guy, and he's just like, no, because guys are really logical on an average, right? It's like, no, I can't get my head around this. This isn't a thing.
Yeah.
Like, where is the child?
I spoke to a guy from New York who was shown his hybrid child.
Right.
Because the ETs came on and said, well, we have no mean to harm you. You need to know why we've been contacting you. This is why. Aren't you excited? He's like, no, I'm not excited. He said all these emotions went through him. He was repulsed by the child. At the same time, he was absolutely drawn to it and loved the child. He was really angry with the ETs. But at the same time, he was relieved and glad he got an explanation. I mean, all this was going on. It was his first and really only full onboard conscious contact, because he was having missing time. And this comes down again to fear. So these people who are having this, and I'm like, gosh, I hate that they're stealing my babies. I understand it. I am certainly not judging anyone.
Right.
But if you can get past the fear, you are much more likely to have communication and understanding of what's going on.
Right.
This is right up there with the most controversial aspect of onboard UFO encounters.
Right. Right.
Dolly Saffron had this experience, and they talked to her about it. She's a fully conscious contactee, and they asked. She said, okay.
Yeah.
And it happened, and she's met her hybrid child more than once, children.
Right.
I mean, he came down and healed her of a broken elbow.
Right. Right.
Like, doctor.
Yeah, that's helpful. Right. Can you use some help now? Where are you? Okay, let me get to some comments if it's okay, or questions. Preston, hello, Don. I have heard it is the Palladians that want to help us and are helping us. Have you heard of this also?
Well, Pleiadians is a word, a label that has become very popular. And I have to tell you, I've done some digging on this to find some good firsthand reporting on Pleiadians as a name.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not finding a whole lot of really good evidence of it.
Interesting.
I would call them human looking.
Right.
And I think that's the label people give kind of to human looking ETs. So I do think that all ETs are healing people. Well, I know, because I documented 300 plus cases.
Right.
Like, let's analyze these. Who's doing the healing? It was more than 50% grays, which was a shock to me.
It is a shock. I would have thought maybe tall whites. I mean,
they're all
grays
there.
but there's different variations of grays, right?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, look at here on this planet, we have people who are very short, people who are incredibly tall, every possible skin color you can imagine, just about.
Right.
And I think we have the same thing going on. There's a bell curve. There's ancestry among ETs as well.
Excellent.
Someone told me, why are there no black ETs? I'm like,
there's not.
There's absolutely black-skinned ETs.
Yes.
I mean, what are you talking?
Yeah, there are. No, there are. Yeah.
There's black, there's white, there's yellow, there's blue, there's red. I've heard all variations.
Right. That's
it's not
crazy.
super common, I will say. I don't get a whole lot of reports of it.
Yeah, very scarce.
I just featured the case recently because I'm like, okay, here's some ammunition for this guy. I'm going to point out. Here's a good case from Denmark.
Yes.
A 15-year-old kid was walking along and a UFO landed, and out came two little black, 4-foot tall humanoids, which looked mostly human, he said. I mean, they had a nose, mouth, the whole deal.
Right.
They were black, they look.
That's crazy.
They had brown skin is how you.
Right. I have to try to find my notes, because when Joe and I did an episode of The Gray Zone Uncensored, we talked about different races of, of alien beings, and we found there were black ones, but they're different than what you're describing. I should try to find them for you and see if I went really dug deep on finding different information, and I was very surprised by it. I was just like, oh, that's interesting. But I'll try to find it and send it to you, because that was probably a couple of years ago, but I do keep everything. So
me too. I looked for green-skinned ones too, and there weren't a whole lot of those as you'd think, because everyone's like, oh, little green men. Yeah.
Not so much, right?
Not as much as you'd think.
Big mantis, maybe. That's green. Magic Martian. I love that handle. Is there any connection between UFO sightings and black helicopters visiting reportees? My mother and I saw TR-3B, reported it, and the next day a black helicopter came to the house.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is not unusual. Contactees will report unmarked black helicopters coming over their house, even, right after an encounter.
Right.
In fact, when I was investigating the Topanga Canyon UFO wave, there was a couple there who were having regular sightings. I mean, this UFO was landing next to the house. She was being pulled on board.
Right.
And they said the helicopters would come the next night for 3 or 4 days in a row, because these encounters would usually happen over 2 or 3 days in a row.
Right.
As soon as one of these saucers showed up, these black helicopters were there. And yeah, they're unmarked, which is technically not supposed to be happening.
No.
They're supposed to have markings on them.
I think she's also saying, like, they reported seeing this TR-3B and they were visited. So I don't know if maybe they are contactees as well, but they were
simply reporting it. Yeah.
And they got a visit.
If you're going public,
Yes.
They are not only monitoring activity, they're threatening witnesses and watching them. So I think that's part of it. It's an intimidation tactic.
Well, again, I mean, it might sound like a really stupid question, but why? You're flying this big behemoth across the sky. Somebody's going to see it. They're not as stealthy as they think they are. There's these triangular shaped jobbers are all over the place. People all over the world are seeing them.
Yeah, well, those are probably reverse engineered government craft.
Right.
It is weird to me that, okay, let's just go over a neighborhood and let everyone see us.
Right.
That's part of probably the false flag preparation.
Yes.
There's so much buzz in the UFO community that I think we need to pay attention to it.
Right.
I looked into triangular UFO cases because Dolly and other people told me no, they're not. ETs don't generally fly triangular craft. So I'm going through all my cases. I'm like, well, gosh darn it, I can't find one. And I finally found a couple, but I think people are sometimes seeing more chevron or V-shaped, describing it as triangular. So I don't know.
Right. She goes, yes, thank you. It was unmarked, unlit, and double propeller, hovered in my yard and shook the house.
Yeah, they'll come right down to window level and look right at you. You can see the person in it. They'll take pictures of you.
That is brazen.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's really brazen.
Not rude. I mean, it's like, really? You really need to do this?
Okay, this is Joe. Now we have drones. Yep. It's true. It's true. There's other things you have to worry about. Well, Preston's your guy, that's for sure. So thank you. Okay, so another star here. Preston, are we not all hybrids?
I think so. I think there's kind of varying degrees of hybrids and levels of contact and a lot going on here. But let's face it, we call ourselves humans. We look the way we look pretty much all across the planet with variation. And then there's ETs that look pretty much like us. They're often described as being perhaps a little taller, 6.5 feet, but not always. I've got cases of 5.5 foot, Mesoamerican or brown skinned or white skin. I mean, all ethnicities again.
Right.
But, the fact that there are human looking ETs out there has profound implications. And here we are struggling to explain human origins as evolution and evolving from, what have you, monkeys. We're according to classic evolution, we came from that little lemur type rodent some millions of years ago. I remember even as a little kid, 13 or 14, kind of trying to track this out. I'm like, okay, how many millions of years, 100,000 years would it take to turn this lemur into every mammal on this planet?
Right.
I don't get this. This doesn't sound right to me.
No.
Not that creationism is any better.
Right.
But once I dived into the UFO field, I'm like, gosh, because a number of contactees have been told that we were basically brought here from Mars, or that there's previous iterations of advanced civilizations that get wiped out and were lifted up and put back.
Right.
And that we're on the tail end of another this sort of thing happening. So yeah, I think we are all hybrids.
Right.
And particularly contactees are having their genetics watched over and maintained very carefully. Because they're the shakers and doers. They're the psychics. They're the doctors and nurses and teachers and inventors and scientists. And they're good people, environmentalists, social workers.
Right.
Super creative artists and musicians.
Right. Well, when you've been overhauled too. And you get a lot of downloads and you always know when you've had, I always say, like, you'll wake up and you feel a little worked over, but you're being sort of like, oh, I've been tweaked. And it's an ongoing joke in the house. I've been tweaked. Yeah. So, but I don't know. I think it's a great thing. once you become
I mean, it's
comfortable
hard
with
for
it.
people. One lady called me from Europe because she was losing her mind. She says, I can't go near computers. I don't know what's happening to me. I break every darn machine I touch. I'm like,
Right.
well, what's happening is your bioelectric field has been enhanced or expanded, or your aura, so to speak, has been strengthened. It's a good thing, but it can be difficult.
It's difficult, especially when you start working with the frequencies, because the frequency changes. At least with me, the frequency will change at times, and sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes not so much, but for me, it helps in my work and what I do, because I do a lot of planetary stuff, right? And
well, you're doing good work, but I was talking to a welder who had this, and he kept blowing out the welding machine, which is super expensive. He almost lost his job over it. They brought him in. They're like, you're going to the doctor. We need to know why you're blowing out this machine every time you go on it. We're taking you off of it.
That's Amelia with her toaster ovens. Her convection ovens. Yeah, it gets very pricey.
Yeah. A lot of contactees can't even wear a watch.
Right. Right.
You just give it up after a while. It always breaks down.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. Next. Question. Hello, Maggie. Is it the reptilians that have the clicking language have had experience of being observed by them?
I couldn't tell you.
I think the Greys do. They sound like dolphins.
Someone just asked me that. They're like, why is it always telepathic? Has not anybody heard the ETs talking? I'm like, well, they have.
Yeah.
The human-looking ones, that's more often you hear just normal language, whatever your language is. Right. And even telepathy, you might hear their language, their voice.
Right.
Rays, one lady says, I could hear them talking to each other. I didn't understand what they were saying. And I asked her, well, how did they sound? And she got all embarrassed. I'm like, just imitate it. And she said, wee, 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 wee. That's how they kind of this high-tech squeaking.
Yeah.
And another lady said she had a visitation by mantids who healed her of glaucoma. And she couldn't see them. Her eyes were closed, but she could hear them talking. And she said it was very clicky. Very clicks and snaps.
That is interesting. The clicking. I've heard clicking. I've got recordings of clicking.
Yeah. This comes up in the previous volume. I did phone call from an alien, which does happen.
Wow.
Betty Andreasen and Debbie Jordan Cobble both experienced this, and it was lots of clicks, lots of consonants. One guy I talked to, he says, when you press your tongue up against the top of your roof of your mouth and go,
yeah.
He says it sounded a lot like that. Dolly says she's heard it, and it reminds her of the Inuit language. So if you want to get a close approximation, you can.
To me, it's sounds like a dolphin. That's that's what Joe says as well. Yeah.
I heard a guy channel dolphins once. He started doing. He's channeling dolphins. I'm like, oh wow, okay, that was different.
But there's something to do with the connection too, though, with dolphins. Yeah. I mean, if you remember Carl Sagan and other scientists created an organization called the Order of the Dolphin, and they believe that dolphins would and could communicate with ET. And there have actually been people who have seen, or especially out at sea, obviously, where at one time a craft came down and the dolphins congregated underneath it and just started swimming underneath and coming up. And
yeah, well, guess what? Here's a little bit of a scoop for you. We're going to put out Symmetry 2.
Right.
I just started the interviews with Dolly, and I brought that up because she says a lot of stuff that I'm like, gosh, why didn't you tell me this before? We could have put it.
I know.
And dolphins came up, and there were some very interesting things to say. Yes, they do take them on board in a nutshell.
Right. Hold on.
And do communicate with them. And I've talked to other people who have seen dolphins on board, or certainly read accounts.
See?
And so remember Star Trek when they were communicating with the whales? One of the Star Trek
I was just about to say that. Yes, the whole planet's about getting ready to get destroyed until you find humpback whales that are extinct in this world or their time, and had to go back in time to get 2 humpback whales and bring them back. It was a fantastic episode of Star Trek.
Yeah.
It has to be one of my favorite.
They're still studying cetaceans and upgrading their what they believe, how intelligent they are. Frankly, all animals. Look, they're looking at ravens and crows because they found out that crows are actually teaching their children, where things are in the neighborhood because they proved this.
Yes. Yes, they're brilliant.
And there's a dog studies where dogs know like 500 words. You can say, go get the fuzzy teddy bear, go get this, go get that. And the guy's got, he's not making any gestures or doing anything. The dog knows. We don't give animals enough credit. If you want to see an ET, look to, whales, dolphins, dogs, birds. Those are other species that are different from us and yet share sentience. Sentience is a word that I think we call ourselves sentient. We're the most intelligent being on this planet. Are we?
No.
We
we can't even play nice in the sandbox. I always say it. We're terrible.
Yeah.
We're salty. We're sassy. We have to have things our own way. I mean, we humanity is just a dangerous animal. And realistically, we kill for sport. Animals they don't do that. They kill for survival or self-defense or, I mean, I don't know. I remember seeing something. I think it was an article. They posted a picture. I have it somewhere. And they did an experiment at one of the world fairs. And basically they had humans, or they had a mirror. And they said, look here and see what you see. And then something along the lines of, this is the most dangerous animal in the world. And they were looking at themselves. That was at one of the world fairs. I'm thinking, wow, that's profound.
Yeah, that is.
That is really profound. Okay, let me just go back here. There we go. Since experiences get harassed at MIB and the like, do you think ETs are secretive to keep us safe?
I think sometimes, yeah. That's a difficult question to answer for sure. Because I think there's different things going on. I think sometimes they're secretive to keep themselves safe.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because we will go after them, our secret government and what have you. But yeah, I know of many cases where people have had an encounter and were basically told, you're not going to remember this for a few weeks. And you will afterwards, because to remember it immediately can be very disruptive. And I think sometimes this is why people do have missing time. Or might not remember it at all because this is not really their path. Their mission in life might involve, raising children or pursuing a career in some, whatever it is. And to suddenly be dealing with, all these memories of contact can be disruptive to what you're trying to achieve. So yeah, I think that is one of the reasons they are or can be secret.
Right. Tom, hi Tom. Our arrogance creates separation from the gifts available between all creatures of this earth. Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, Betty Andreas,
Ego.
One of my favorite contactees. The ETs told her, all the answers you seek can be found in nature, which is an amazing statement. Because if you read, the philosophers and scientists, that's where we learned almost everything we know. Medicine came from basically botany.
Yes, that's true. Still does.
All the medicines we have were from plants originally.
Yes.
So there's a lot we can learn from nature.
I think also, when you go back in time, ancient people emulated what they saw, what they respected, what they were in awe of. And you see so many ancient structures, you see petroglyphs, hieroglyphs, you see, like oral history that gets passed down. I tend to wonder, should we be looking at all this technology, which is just so, as much as we love it, it's so bad for us. And, just with the microwaves and frequencies and things like that, it's just simpler to go back to a simpler time because the ancients seem to have it together. They really had a good understanding of working. They would say, like, our friends from the stars, or the Hopi would say, our big-eyed friends from right, from underground and things like that.
Native Americans were really smart in terms of how they treated the environment.
Yes.
We come over and in just a few years, we killed all the buffalo. It's like, what? Which was intentional, actually. But
right.
I mean, we're polluting our rivers. There is DDT in every organic molecule on this planet. They found it at the bottom of the ocean. The bottom of the ocean has a layer of plastic underneath it, at the bottom. We are not that bright. We are destroying our own food source, our own air.
Right.
This is what the ETs keep telling us. Like, what? What are you doing?
Yeah. We're going backwards.
Yeah. This is why I think, this is another positive aspect of ET contact. If they're taking people on board and healing them, and then saying, don't use nuclear weapons. Why are you doing this? You're on the pathway to self-destruction. The greed, the corruption, the warlike ways. Stop chopping down the forests. What are you doing? That's a good message. I don't. If they wanted to hurt us, they could just leave us alone, and we would do it ourselves.
Oh, we're doing a fine job on our own. Absolutely. And we have to factor in that even plants, have a degree of intelligence. Trees communicate through the root system, and they ground you. They ground this planet. They create your oxygen. When everybody would laugh, at the term, "Oh, hug a tree," all the tree huggers out there. But a tree will very willingly share its energy, and it does ground our energy. This comes right from the earth. And you look at stone, which holds memory and has resonance. Everything on this planet does something. When you pick up a rock, you don't think much of it. But honestly, I mean, scientists have done experiments with different stones and how they have frequencies. And you go into these temples, for example, or churches, and the Knights Templar talk about this with, circular rooms, and you can sing, you can chant, you can do all these incredible things. And they are able to actually catch these recordings, this residual from the stone, ancient bowls. Even clay bowls, will pick up different imprints and memory. They've all experimented with this stuff.
I really like the work of, what's Emoto? The guy who does that book on water. Now you can meditate on water, and it makes clear crystals and all these formations if you put love energy towards it.
Right.
He was very scientific about it. The book was fascinating. I wish someone would duplicate his research.
Oh my gosh.
It was so interesting.
I find it very interesting. Sometimes people will definitely, you take that a step further. Some people label their water, and they will, they'll talk to it and, give love, and, well, this is what I'm going to do today. Or, I'm going to drink you and you're going to nourish me. And one university in the United States did an experiment with plants, and they had 2 plants that they put behind 2 glass partitions. One, you were supposed to talk nice to. Every day the students would walk up to it and tell this plant how beautiful it was, how smart it was, and the plant flourished. Whereas the other plant was bullied, and all the leaves started wilting and going brown, and it was dying.
Oh my gosh, that poor plant.
I know. I know. I'm just like, leave the poor plant alone. Talk nice to it, after all. But I mean, right. But the thing is it goes to show you, it's just like there's so much that we don't think about. You don't think about that with plants. I always talk to my plants. My plants are happy. I got happy plants, Preston.
Yeah. Well, one lady I interviewed, a contactee, as a very young child, she was living in this convent area, right, with all these nuns.
Right.
Where she was learning from them, rather. She was living in an embassy, but would go to this convent to be taught. Right. And she was displaying some weird abilities, like out-of-body experiences. She was describing the city around them.
Right.
And she knew more about the human body than she could, but there's this other really weird thing that the room that she stayed in, the flowers would always stay fresh. In the other rooms, they weren't. And they finally tracked it to her. They asked her to join, they asked her mother, can she join the convent? And she's like, well, you can ask her. She's 4 or 5, right?
Right.
She's like, no, I'm not doing that.
No, I'm good. I'm 5 and I know better. Yeah.
That was amazing because, I've seen Dolly work with plants.
Right.
We got an orchid plant from a friend last year.
Right.
It's still blooming. I mean, blooms came back. I've never.
Right. I have one.
Seen that.
Must be a something thing. I'll leave
I
it
don't
there.
know. People have green thumbs, I guess, but contactees have a special connection to nature.
Yes.
Yes. I hear it all the time.
Yes.
That's one of the questions I asked. Do you have any weird animal stories? And they're like, oh my gosh, yes. Anytime I go to anybody's house, the dog comes running or the cat right to me.
Right.
And everyone's like, well, gosh, that cat hates everybody.
Right.
They're petting it. Oh, really?
Likes me, apparently. I'll tell you a very incredible story with a wolf. When I was about, I would say 13, and we, school trip, we ended up at this, it was a private zoo, and they rehabilitated some animals, and there's some animals that really shouldn't have been there. It's a zoo, right? So I went up to an Arctic wolf, and I guess it's another strange thing. It's just like, why wasn't better security? So I went up to the wolf. It looked at me. I looked at it. We just seemed to have a connection. I put my hand on the fence. It kept rubbing against my hands. And I put my hands in, and I just started, through the fence, and just started rubbing it. And this thing was just like just all over me. And they come rushing at me. No, you're not supposed to do that. It's just really aggressive. I'm just like,
No.
the aggressive thing about this thing. But as soon as they pulled me out and my arms got yanked out, the thing just went like ballistic. So.
Well, you gave me a good segue to go to mention the book again.
Let's do this.
From here, Volume 5, because I did a chapter with ETs taking dogs on board. Here, let me pull up this picture.
Oh, I love it.
Which is so cute. My mouse is suddenly malfunctioning. Here we go. But at any rate, I found a bunch of cases where ETs have taken people's dogs on board. There was this little guy from Ukraine, Rado, who the ETs came to his bedroom and like, we need to take you on board. He's like, can I take my dog? And I said, sure. And they took him on board with his dog.
Right.
Dolly said that she was often taken with her pet. I think Heidi was the dog's name.
Right.
I found this other case. It's so funny. This guy from Louisiana was hunting in the bayou with his dog Hunterbone, his best friend. He's a backwoods guy. And this UFO lands and his dog goes running towards it. He's like, Hunterbone, stop. Next thing, he's chasing after Hunterbone right up to this UFO. Boom, they're both on board. Well, he is, right? And there's little grays and they're examining him and took him up, into outer space, showed him another planet. Said, you need to stop messing around with nuclear power. You guys are much too warlike. The whole thing.
Right.
And he's looking around for his dog and saw his poor dog floating around like a stuffed animal, paralyzed. And he's like, what's up? He said, well, your dog tried to bite us.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
The poor Hunterbone was floating around like a stuffed animal on board the UFO.
Oh, my God.
But I found a lot of cases where people have seen dogs on board.
Right. So, I mean, if ET loves animals, and what do you make of all these cattle mutilations?
Not ET.
That's what I thought too.
I know that there's a lot of people who've got a lot of opinions about this.
Yes.
And I sort of avoided the subject until I decided I'm going to write UFOs over New Mexico because it's got the Roswell crash. And it's got a lot of really important incidents. And I'm writing books on various states that I felt these states are influencing how we perceive the subject. And New Mexico, and I did one for Colorado, they're both the hardest hit states.
Right.
So I had to study mutilations. And I started going to the most famous, well-known researchers. Lawrence Fawcett and Barry Greenwood were among the first to discuss it, and they ultimately decided it was government. I'm like, well, that's interesting.
Yes.
And so did Gabe Valdez, and he lived there and studied one after another. I talked to Christopher O'Brien. He's like, I'm not so sure it's ETs. He's got his own opinions about what it is. But I don't think that it's ETs. And
Right.
boy, when I brought it up to Dolly, she lost her mind. She's like, they're not. They wouldn't do that. They don't do that.
Right.
This is disinformation.
Right. Right.
So, I know that there's a lot of black helicopters being seen on these.
Yes.
People do report UFOs, but we do
Yes.
have reverse engineered craft.
Yes.
And we do have 5G technology that can make you think you're seeing a craft.
Right.
And we certainly had the technology to do what people are describing in terms of these precision cuts.
Right.
Well, at the time, we didn't have lasers when a lot of these were taking place. We actually did. It's just not in the public arena. So that was ultimately what my assessment is. And I know there are researchers out there who disagree, but I looked into it, and I have to tell you, that's, I think, the most logical explanation. It fits the pattern of what our government, I don't like that term, the secret government, the cabal, is trying to do here.
Right. Right.
It's not that they won't take cattle on board,
Right.
People have seen elk on board, and like you said, dolphins. One lady, she was taken on board with she was on her pony with her dog, and both were taken on board. This is not a dog and pony show. This is for real.
Oh my word. That is just so funny.
Another guy was taken on board with his dog, and they weren't really that interested in him. They wanted to examine his dog. So,
wow. They would be hard pressed with my dogs because they're like little 2-pound chihuahuas that think they're like a lot bigger. And poor
it's
little
so
Grace.
interesting because dogs can sense them coming.
Yes.
Some animal reaction cases.
Yes.
The animals know. They have abilities that we are still trying to develop. People have it too because they're like, somebody's watching me, and they turn around.
Right.
Boom, there's the ET, or there's a UFO, or like, I need to go outside right now. And boom, that happened to me actually. So I kind of get it.
Right.
Yeah, we have a lot to learn from our little furry friends.
We do. They pick up on everything. They're just highly intuitive. But they can also feel, again, frequency. They can feel when things are changing. A few years ago, at the manor house, like our other house, you could feel something come over. And my other home as well was also the same. Like the last 2 places I've lived. And you could feel the whole house shake when something would come over it. Like it was very, very silent, but you could just feel it going like this. You look outside, nothing there. You could still see like right through to the stars. But there was a degree of silence, except for the shaking of the house.
Yeah, I talked to Linda Zimmerman, and she put out the first book on animal reactions not too long ago. She's a New York-based researcher.
Right.
I'm like, oh my gosh, how it's been what 80 years since this subject has really kind of moved towards the mainstream.
Right.
She's the first person to even look into this case, analyzing all these cases.
Right.
Funny, going on along that theme, Dolly mentioned once that ETs like capybaras, which is the largest rodent in the rodent family. The capybara.
Right.
A lot of people don't even know what that is. But sure enough, I met, Dolly knows someone who was taken on board with her, and I met him, and he's like, oh my gosh, do you remember? And he turns to Dolly, he's like, what were those animals called? Those big giant rats almost. And she's like, oh, capybaras. He's like, that's it. They were running around the ship.
That is hilarious, though. Seriously. But you know what? They should be, because I think it would actually calm people the heck down. If I was people a little bit on edge being taken, and you see a little cat or a chihuahua or a little dog running by, I think that would make I would feel a little bit more calmed down about it if I was on edge,
Yeah. It's funny. There was a lady at my office where I worked, Leslie, and she absolutely adored capybaras. She had pictures all over her office. I'm looking at her, and I wanted to ask her, have you been taken on board? I didn't get the chance. She didn't last that long. She was there a month or so. It was a tough office to work. My boss. I mean, nameless.
That's funny.
Still have nightmares about that place.
Oh my God. That is funny.
But I wondered.
You never know, because sometimes things are going on in the background. People don't even know. Okay, I'm going to back up again a little bit again. will any of the ET groups help to clean up the environment and help stop geoengineering?
I wouldn't count on it. We make our own messes, and it's really up to us to clean up. But I think there's some limited amount of intervention. They're clearly concerned about the environment. And there was all this, they did hover over the Malmstrom power plant, right? And there's reports of them over Chernobyl. There's reports of them over 3 Mile Island, and more recently over Fukushima. And I wondered, are they mitigating it to some degree?
Right.
Because there's, they do intervene to some level. But no, I'm not going to count on them to fix our own problems, because we would not learn. At some point, every child has to touch the stove and realize, ouch, that does hurt.
Yes. Yes.
Don't touch it again.
So essentially, we have to clean up our own mess.
Yeah. And it's a tough lesson. But
it's a tough lesson because it's not everybody. We're sort of at the mercy of people who are causing the harm.
That way. But if everyone really, got the gumption and said, no, I'm not going to carry a gun and go kill people in other countries. I'm not doing it. If everyone in the world did that, well, wars would be over in a day. I know that's a
pipe dream,
idealistic and optimistic. But I mean, seriously, if we just allowed love and truth to guide our actions, most people are super compassionate. Once they get, you might not like someone who's different and feel like they're stepping on you and taking your resources, but get to know them. And next thing you know, you're friends and you give them anything.
Right.
I think I give people a chance, but I don't think they're going to stop genetic engineering. I recently stopped eating bioengineered food, and it was tough. I went to the store. Actually, we saw it online and checked our cupboard, and I'm like, oh no.
Everything is there.
We had to throw a lot of stuff away.
Yes.
And I'm like, some of these famous companies were like, oh, we're natural, and we remember how to make food the old-fashioned way. No, you don't.
Yeah. I call BS. Right.
Yeah, and it's not in the ingredients yet. It's below the ingredients in the tiniest writing you can actually read.
Right.
Legally, I think.
Yeah, they have to list it, but they want to do it so you're like, oh, I can't even be bothered to look, because it's so tiny.
There's a way to avoid it, because it's outlawed in Europe.
Right.
Anything imported from European countries is probably safe.
I think some of these European countries eat better than we do. I'll tell you, I'm a world traveler. I have traveled to obscene amounts of places, and you'll go to a fast food place here, and it's completely different. Like overseas, Australia, for example, some of these places like the Golden Arches, they change, and they have to change out their produce every single morning, or they can be fined. I would go to, a famous chicken place that we love down here. I go over there and I'm just like, no, this is like fuel injected over here. I'm not touching it. You go over there and I'm like, nah, I'm not being tricked. And, meanwhile, my friends who live there are like, no, try it. They're completely normal chickens. Like, and you can see they're considerably smaller, and they don't taste strange. You taste the difference.
Yeah, like the tomatoes at the store, they're so big and red and beautiful, but they're tasteless.
They are. They are. Yeah.
They're very pretty, though, I will say.
That's right. They look good, but no. All these shenanigans. Question, any thoughts on the alleged Holloman AFB landing film, the Emenegger film story? That's a description I've never heard from another encounter, military or private person. Bluish gray nose.
Yeah, well, ETs do come in different shapes and sizes, and there are certainly cases of people describing prominent noses on short little humanoids and tall and what have you.
Right.
So, there's ears, sometimes there's no ears. There's hair sometimes there's no hair. So,
sometimes they look like a bug, sometimes they do not.
It doesn't surprise me. I take a grain of salt anything that's coming from military sources or government sources these days, because of their heinous, I love that word, their heinous history with this subject.
Yes.
But that's an interesting thing because there was supposed to be a released film on this, and then they backtracked and backpedaled, and there's some footage leaked out which allegedly shows this craft coming down towards Holloman. I would love to see it. Our government is saying, "Oh, we don't have evidence." Yes, you do. Every fighter jet has cameras on them.
Yes.
These little white dots they're showing us, it's disingenuous. I mean, they have great footage.
You know they do. You know they do. But I think they look at it as, well, it's on the need to know basis, and you people don't all really need to know. That's pretty much how it is. I mean, when I
need to know. I need it. I can feel it right here. I need to know.
I need to know. We all need to know.
It's driving me crazy. I know. The Edwards Air Force Base. I want to see that film. In 1954, when Eisenhower was there, and so were heads of state and military and technology, and this UFO landed and said, "Stop exploding nuclear weapons."
Yeah.
You need to, basically start disclosing. And we're like, no, we want your technology. They're like, we're not doing that.
Right. I know.
No, trade for, we're going to allow, quote, abductions in exchange for technology. That's flat out disinformation, in my opinion.
Right.
But there is a film out there that was filmed from multiple sources. That's really good reporting on that. Not just me, but a lot of researchers have looked into it.
Right.
So yeah, they have landed at Air Force bases.
Right.
I'm pretty sure that that's not completely unique, but I don't think it's been going on lately.
They've landed on aircraft carriers.
I think at some point they just gave up with the government.
Yes.
Dolly's like, oh yeah, they're not wasting their time.
Yeah.
People who are that close-minded, and I mean they have evil intentions, and you cannot sway them from it.
Power. What power and the hunger for power does to people is just unbelievable, because you are not here on the grand scheme of things. We are not on this planet for a really long time. You have to make the best of it, and what you do with it is going to determine, your where you go next, as far as the next part of your journey.
It's freaky.
It
is very short. My brother passed away a couple of years ago. God, that was shocking. He's only 61 years old.
Yeah.
It really was a reminder. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to live every day here.
Yeah.
I'm going to start sliding into my 60s before long.
I know, it's true. It's
like, here it comes.
I know. So I think, we think we need wake-up calls. Without a doubt, we need wake-up calls. And we are being dumbed up or dumbed down. And we have to, you don't have any control over what's going on around you. You just have control over how you handle it. So if you're just putting out all this bad vibrations, this is what's going to come back. It's a karmic thing as well. You carry that through life. You're already like carrying karmic things for yourself or your family or whatever the heck happened in the past, one way or another. It follows you back. And people are like, wonder why my life has just been crap all this time. I've been a good person. Maybe it's karmic. So when you factor all of that in, do you really want to sit there and add anything else to it that you really don't have any control over?
Your attitude is a big deal. I just looked into a case in Puerto Rico where a mother and daughter were taken on board, and the mother was basically dying because she had lost her husband and couldn't take it. She was going downhill, and they were going to move to their uncle's. But on the way there, they were scooped up. These ETs were there, grays and human looking. They took them each into separate rooms. They healed the daughter of a condition with her legs, and then healed the mother and said, the cause of your illness is actually you. You need to get rid of these negative feelings.
Right.
She's like, my husband, they took her to see her husband, his spirit.
Wow.
And the daughter too. So this was on board a craft and basically facilitated a interdimensional spiritual meeting with her deceased loved ones. Not only her husband, but her parents as well, who were also crossed over.
Wow.
And
that's so nice. That's beautiful.
This was missing time, by the way. They did not remember this.
Of course not.
Which is odd because it wasn't really a scary experience for them. It was when they were scooped up. They're like, ah. But yeah, they came back and they're like, well, gosh, I'm feeling better.
Oh,
and years later, they're under hypnosis, and both separately recalled this. So that's, corroboration there.
Right.
Not false memory syndrome if both people are remembering the same thing.
Right.
It was a cool case because sometimes people talk about, seeing deceased loved ones on board UFOs, but I have one or two cases. But that's when I read about it. I'm like, well, yeah, I guess this does happen.
Mm-hmm. Right. I love this statement. I think the future pulls us away from the past. I think that's what we were touching on a little bit before, minus less all of this technology. I think, I think they had it right. I mean, I remember seeing UFOs back in the day before satellites. I'm aging myself. I don't care. But, back before satellites. So when you saw something in the sky, you didn't have to question it. It was there. I grew up north. I would see all kinds of things on a regular basis.
Well, I like that statement because, I grew up as a skeptic, right?
Right.
Then my mom dies and I'm living in a state of constant fear. Find out UFOs were real. I'm like, oh my gosh, now I'm really scared because they're taking people against their will. And then I started having out-of-body experiences and I'm like, okay, now I've lost my mind. I need to rebuild my belief system. And everything changed, and I finally figured out, okay, this is why ETs are here. It's not so bad. It's actually good news. We can go out of body. There is life after death. And I found out that prior to this, I was living in both the past and the future.
Right.
And I see this in people. They are not in the present moment. Their lives are guided by the trauma of the past and the fear of the future. They're completely tied to both. I got to worry about where my next dollar is coming from. This happened to me. I can't do that again. And if you can just kind of focus more on the present moment, it starts to expand and you have this greater awareness and you can actually start getting clairvoyant visions of the future and understanding the past. Time is such an interesting thing because here on Earth, it's very focused and you're like, do. But you go out of body and everything, the veil is lifted. And it's a different time is a different experience. It's hard to describe.
Right.
But yeah, people are like just stuck between the past and the future and pulled away from the present. They're not even in the present.
Right. No, it's true. I have to do a really quick station. I can put that I'm the manager. I have to do a sponsor station ID. Sorry. Anyway, for those who are just tuning in, I know because I'm just so enthralled into the show and I don't like having to stop. I can't preach it, not do it. So anyway, for everybody just tuning in, you're listening to the Outer Realm Radio. I am Michelle Desrochers. Special guest tonight is our dear friend, Preston Dennett. Yay. I would like to call you Mr. UFO. Yeah.
Living cold words.
So he is talking about his new book, which is UFOs, Not From Around Here, Volume 5, which is filled with stories of UFOs and aliens and all that fun stuff, but in a nice way. But this one here apparently has some pretty risque stuff in it, like anal probes. There's a chapter on anal probes.
That's a prior volume.
To me, it's outstanding. Anyway, and we are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee. We are sponsored by Justice Snicker, aka Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, and Steve McGinnis, the artist behind all of our logos and banners. So we're very, very, very grateful. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in. To everybody in chat, you all rock, and we are so grateful to have you as being a part of the show. So thank you. All right. So I was going to go up here while we were on the topic. Do we have ETs living on Earth now?
kind of a trick question.
Ah.
No, I know Dolly says no. I think at some point we absolutely did.
Right.
Because there are some reports of this.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's a trick question because I think actually we are all ET ourselves in a way, and I don't mean to like stay on the fence or dodge the question, but yeah, it's a trick question. I personally think it's entirely possible some are here and chose to be here, but that's almost impossible to answer. But definitely in the past, because there's so many examples of ETs being in public places, like whether it's just, in front of a school. There was a really interesting case by Shane Kurz of this ET right in front of the school, high school. But
it's there,
gas stations, convenience stores, casinos,
So they're there.
Well, they can walk among us. I don't know how long they're staying here. Hybrids as well. I think because every now and then you'll see people who've got really big eyes. And I was just talking to a guy who met this. This was in the 70s. He had this really interesting conversation with this lady who walked away from absolutely convinced she was ET because she had this just strange, very peaceful outlook and was super etheric and just different. And he's like, I don't know, people are going to call me crazy, but I think she was ET.
I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. But I mean, you hear so many stories now where, it's believed that they're all just blending in. I would never say, but what I'm saying. I know Dolly blurted it out a few times, like, die! But I'm just saying, like, it could be your neighbor. They don't all look like,
Well, I do remember hearing a report from this guy in Topanga Canyon, which is a huge hotspot. I did a book on it, but I still get reports there. I grew up there. This guy's, there's 2 reports actually, now that I think of it. This guy's driving along and he pulls over because there's this guy looking at the stars. And he's like, okay, this looks interesting. He just pulled over because, it was a clear night and he wanted to see the telescope this guy's looking for. And the guy kind of looked a little different. He had the hypnotic eyes. The eyes always give him away, right? And he said, go ahead, look through the telescope. It wasn't a telescope. It was something else. It was super. It was showing stuff that he couldn't believe. I didn't get to do a formal interview with him. I came away from that meeting thinking that was an ET.
Yeah.
And I heard this other guy who's driving along and stops his car because he's looking in a house. And there are 4 people sitting at a table. And they're just all like that, just staring, not moving. And he said it was the weirdest thing. And I forget what he said, but I forget. But there was something he said that like made me like, what the heck? Like, was the house was still there, but there was nobody in it, or I don't know. It was a weird story. But he looked at the 4 people, and they were not moving for a long time. Just sitting there, not they weren't eating. They were. This is a family, a husband and wife, a son and a daughter. So, I sometimes think about that, like, what the heck was that?
What did I just see? Yeah, that would be pretty rough.
Speaking of ETs among us, I just looked into another case from South America with Brazil, where this guy picks up a hitchhiker, and he's like, "Would you like a smoke? A cigarette?" He says, "No, I don't smoke." But he was carrying this weird metallic case, and he had really piercing blue eyes that were almost twice the size as normal, really white blonde hair, a tiny, tiny little nose, very thin mouth, and was asking all these questions of him, right? And the guy says, well, yeah, I live at this and this address. And the conversation went on a while. And he says, okay, you can drop me off here. It's the middle of nowhere, right? He's like, well, okay, you sure? It's like, yeah, you can drop me off here. So he drops the guy off, goes driving, and minutes later, a UFO comes down and takes him. And later he was taken on board again. And there, of course, was the guy, still dressed in his Earth clothes, the guy with the the blue eyes and the blonde hair. He says, don't be afraid. Yeah, it's me. He introduced his name as Alex. He's like, I'm Alex. Sure you are. So yeah, this is a guy. I love these cases. It's the hitchhiker. I did a chapter on one of the Not From Here volumes, hitchhiking aliens.
Right.
This keeps happening. This is a new case. I've got like 12 or more than that, 15 of
Right.
hitchhiking ETs. So that does happen.
I truly believe that we have been living through, especially the last decade. I think people they feel like they can come forward a little bit more. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot more. And with that being said, I think we need to start being careful. As Napakoku says, hello and welcome. How do you conclude something is fake news? Is it gut or research? This is a really valid question because we're really going to start having to question what we see.
Everything.
Yes.
Definitely do not discard your intuition.
Right.
And if the more you can practice with it, but you absolutely have to verify. I think it's very important to do your own research, verify everything. The news is famous for, we talked about it, how I've and you've been misrepresented on TV. But this is true with all kinds of different subjects. And the news in particular has changed over the years. Right. Oh my God, it used to be news. It's not really news anymore. It's very editorial. And people are just giving their opinions. And they're flat out lying in some of these cases. I think, use your intuition for sure. But if you hear a story that is questionable, check it out. We do have Google and all kinds of ways of confirming information.
Well, unless you're, suppressed and censored, like some poor folks up in Canada.
This has been called the information age, which lasted about 5 years before it turned into the disinformation age.
Right.
The lies are rampant. This is why we need to do telepathy.
Right.
Because then we would know if a dollars is back engineered can fool you. Well, if you have telepathy, you can figure it out. If you have telepathy, we can look at any politician and say, well, nope, no, yes, no, yes.
Right. So essentially, we have to go back to, to the roots of just keeping our abilities heightened.
Yeah, well, certainly this is what the ETs are trying so hard to do. I did a chapter in the Not From this current volume on warnings and messages because so many people were asking me, you should do a book on this. If this is the message people often get, do a book on it. And I kept trying, but gosh, I want to write a 500-page book on it. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just do a chapter. Let's get this out.
Right.
Because it is the most common message people get.
Right.
And that ended up being the longest chapter. And I think it's my favorite and most important chapter in the book.
Wow. But I'm glad that, you're informing, people on that. I think it's really important because, we're all born with these abilities. And I think, again, it's just conditioning. It's just what they put in the food. It's just what's in the environment. It hinders our abilities, and we walk around in a cloud with our our head all fogged up, and it doesn't have to be that way. Okay, next. Has Dolly, Preston, or others ever encountered a small, completely round-headed, joyous ET? Sounds like a little happy gray.
I'm not sure if I would say, gosh, well, let me think about this. None is specifically coming to mind. I have to tell you, it wouldn't surprise me a bit because you hear, the praying mantis have usually described triangular heads. I've heard, kind of squarish heads. They're little blue beings.
Right.
And squat little roundish heads. Most are oval, very much like ours. But, there are round-faced people here on this planet. Joyous, yes, absolutely. Happy little dancing grays. One lady I interviewed, she thought they were kids at first. She was taken on board at age 12.
Right.
Back in 1947. And she thought they were kids at first until she realized, they're bald. They've kind of got large eyes. But they were feeling her hair. She had long blonde hair.
Ah,
This
they
is
do
the
like the
same girl
hair.
who, we talked about the flowers that she
Yes.
kept alive. That's her.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
This UFO lands on the road in front of her while she's biking to her friend's house, and there's a praying mantis in the doorway. She
Oh,
says, "You can call me mother. You can call me mother." And it was very friendly, and she was taken on board. It was a very friendly experience. And these little grays were hopping around, laughing and joyous, feeling her
right.
head. They were like little kids. They took her hand and they led her excitedly to show her the ship. So it was a
Right.
really cool experience.
Right.
And people have described feeling, quote, a love like never before. I've heard that exact phrase a number of times.
Right.
Little 2 foot, 3 foot tall ETs.
Right.
So yeah, that does come up. Absolutely. I'm not sure, but I've heard someone describe a perfectly round head.
Mm-hmm.
But now you got me curious because, there was one lady who was driving down the highway. I knew one would come to me.
Right.
And her husband was asleep. I think this was in Arizona, Nevada, the Southwest. And it's late at night, of course. Whenever you're on a remote highway late at night, stay aware because that's when they're going to come.
Right.
And she sees this figure with this little round head running across. It stops and looks at her, and she screams and races past it. And her husband wakes up. He's like, "What?" She's like, "You're not going to believe it. He was wearing a jumpsuit. It had this little round head. It looked right at me." He's like, "Let's turn around." She says, "I'm not turning around. I'm going to go to the nearest city, and you're welcome to go back. I am not."
Wow. That's funny.
She wasn't going to do it.
I'll tell you, kids are awesome though. Like, when a child, have you ever interviewed like just little ones who've given you accounts of
couple of times.
Yeah, and what's that like compared to? Because I guess you have to be careful not to lead them, right?
Yeah, well, I won't do it unless it's in the presence of their parent.
Of course,
for legal reasons, right?
Right, but kids are just so enthusiastic when they're retelling you an incredible
it was
adventure.
fun, yeah.
Yeah,
I've done it with my own relatives. Certainly, I have no compunctions there.
Right.
Because I'm the uncle. I don't need to talk to your dad. You're talking to me now. And I'll take whatever repercussions come.
That's right. Give it up, kid.
I did interview this 12-year-old who thought he saw a UFO, and his dad contacted me and says, "I really want you to talk to my son. I think this would be a good experience for him."
Right.
I'm like, "Sure." And he was on the other line. No, this was a phone interview. And it was so much fun because this kid was so excited. He'd seen this thing. And I knew instantly this was a real UFO because he was describing the classic, it stops, it hovers, it darts.
Right.
And I told him, well, I got the whole description. And then I played I asked the hard questions like, how do you know this wasn't a plane? And the kid did not get flustered at all. And, and he's like, "Oh, I know it wasn't a plane because planes go in a straight line across the sky." And I'm like, "That's right. How do you know it wasn't a helicopter?" He says, "It made no noise. There's no noise."
Oh,
like, was it low enough for you to see? He's like, "Yeah, it was really low."
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah.
And I've been at UFO meetings, or conventions, when people bring their kids up and they're like, "Tell them what you saw." And the kid's all excited, like, "It was a little, this little kid came and played with me. And he had no hair and he had big eyes," and stuff like that. So that's not a formal interview, but yeah.
But it's
kids
cool.
are very open-minded.
Right.
And,
but that's the thing is I think they are at that point, and somewhere along the line, sometimes it changes and they develop this, this fear. Have you talked to adults that have had this from childhood, and do they still have, fears? And I only comes to mind when you say, "Oh yeah, she was only this age, I saw a mantis in her doorway saying, 'Call me mother.'" I'd be like, "Hell no, I don't think so. It's this thing." That's just the first impression, of course, So
well, she said it was very maternal, very loving, very nurturing.
Right.
But yeah, I talked to one lady who had experiences as a young girl, and it was very joyous. They'd come, they'd play with her toys, she'd play with them. It was fun. Around age 12 or 13, not fun anymore.
Right.
Having missing time, she was terrified and didn't want it, and then grew up into an adulthood, and things changed a little bit, and it became a very positive experience for her ultimately. But she went through stages, which I certainly see quite a bit. Right. At age 12, they told her, when you want us to come, all you have to do is roll up your blanket into a Tootsie Roll and tuck it under the bottom of your mattress. And that way we'll know that's our signal so that you're ready to be visited. She said, and it worked. They would come and visit her and give her all these profound messages. Well, she never could remember. She never could remember what they were telling her.
Wow. See, that's really tough. Do you think they don't remember to protect them? Just to protect them from others?
I don't know.
Do you think they don't tell them just to? Well, I don't mean so much other. I'm dealing. I'm dealing with a couple of families right now, and it's not necessarily just ET that they're having experiences with. I think it's military as well, and it's happening now to the children.
Not unusual.
Right. And so for me, like,
they'll come in my lab, people who are having genuine encounters and muddy the waters. There was a lady, who was taken on board as a kid, and they showed her all these nuclear bombs and stuff exploding, and said, you need to know that this is a real danger, but you won't remember this. You're going to have some nightmares about this, and we're sorry, but you're going to remember this at some point. And she remembers. She had horrific nuclear bomb nightmares that night.
Wow.
Which, I think they were doing their best to sort of shield her while at the same time imparting the information. And as an adult, she realized what was going on.
Right.
But yeah, I think to some extent they don't want to traumatize people. The last thing they want to do is scare people. The first thing they say is, don't be scared. You're okay. Calm down. Everything's fine. No harm will come to you.
Right. Right.
And if you're still like, nah, this is when you more than likely will have missing time and probably not remember anything. Just missing time.
Right. Right.
But, trauma has a way of bubbling to the surface. And then you see these faces looking at you and you lose your mind. And this is when people say, how can you say this is good for me? I had missing time. I know they took me. I've got this mark on my body, having these nightmares.
Right.
Yeah, well, I understand. Have you ever gone under hypnosis? And sometimes they do. And then they start to realize, well, the first thing they did say was this.
Yeah. It's tough.
They actually did heal me. One guy in England, he doesn't like them. Or comment, he doesn't like it to this day.
Right.
But I asked him, have you gotten anything good out of this? He's like, well, me and my wife have incredible clairvoyant and psychic abilities. And when we go to these contests, we win them. We know which, whatever to pick.
Right.
And he has major out-of-body experiences.
Right. Right. But so that's a gift.
It is. He connects it definitely to his experiences.
Right.
The astral projection is a big part of it. Telepathy, astral projection, healing, mediumship, clairvoyance, precognition, remote viewing.
Right.
I did a chapter in one of the Not From Here books on human levitation because
we did a show on that.
Yes. And this is
fascinating.
This is something can you imagine being able to do that? That's the
coolest all the time.
Oh my gosh. I just talked to a lady, Heidi Hansen. I'm like, I don't suppose she's contacting me. I'm like, I don't suppose you've levitated. She's like, yes, I did. Right at the top of the stairs, floating around, circling around the landing twice. You're kidding. It's always when they're little kids, often up and down the stairs. We talked about that. But contactees are sometimes have this ability. I don't know if it's sparked in them or what have you. Jacques Vallée had a case where the guy was healed of a partial paralysis and an axe wound. He levitated twice, verified by his wife, just floating around, flying around.
Right.
Bud Hopkins had cases. Stephen Greer, he did it twice, he says. Right after he was taken on board, had a very spiritual experience with the Greys.
Right.
He got out of the craft and started levitating home. Boing, 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 boing. And later levitated, years later. This is an ability we have. And the ETs are trying so hard to wake us up to what we can do. Another lady I talked to got back from her encounter. Books started flying off the walls. Doors are opening and closing. Lights going on and off.
That's what I was telling you. Projection and like we're powerful beings.
Yeah. Telekinesis.
Yes.
Dolly experienced a few episodes of telekinesis as a young girl. Well, more than once actually, as an adult too. So So this is something that they're trying very hard to wake us up to, that we're immortal, that we can go out of body, that there is life after death.
Right. Karen, hello, says, what makes people levitate? Some and not others.
Anyone can do it. It's in every culture. There are literally hundreds of reports. Each culture has their own approach to it, not their own understanding. With across Europe, basically lots of nuns and monks started levitating because they prayed all the time.
Yes.
God, and steeped their lives in love, and were very moral, and really just worked on spiritual development. Whereas in the Far East, they learned how to do breathing exercises and chi and all these martial arts kind of stuff. And in like India, they had specific exercises on how to specifically levitate. I mean, they had it down to an actual science. In Africa, they would, rhythmic breathing, and all these different disciplines. Anyone can do it. Native Americans did it. They had what they would call spiritual runners, or I forget what they called it, special runners of some kind, who could basically, they tracked this one guy, these trackers. This group of people had to go from one city to another, and the Indian guy's like, no, I don't need to take the wagon, I'm just gonna run there. And so they followed him. He's running off, and they followed his footprints. They got wider and wider and wider and wider, and then they disappeared. And finally 3 days later, they get to the town, and he's there, and everyone's like, oh yeah, he's been here for 3 days. What took you so long? This guy was did Indian running, I think is what they called it.
That's crazy.
Anyone can do it. Anyone.
Right.
Lots of cases of little kids doing it. There was a guy.
There's videos of kids doing it.
Yeah. There was a guy in Russia who they asked him, how do you do it? He says, I just do it by willpower. He's a farmer. There was another guy, Ermolayev, a famous psychic. He says, I just imagine it. I visualize it. Another lady, she was at one of those side yard fairs, those country fairs. It was a little booth. She could basically lighten her weight by half. It was her little trick. She's like, some researcher found this and tracked her down and asked her how she does it. She said, well, my dad could do it, and I inherited this ability. I found a bunch of cases where it is inherited. The royal Hungarian family had several people in their lineage that could do this. She said, basically, I just feel light in here. She tapped her torso. I just get this feeling of lightness. According to Daniel Douglas Home, a medium, he says, well, the spirits help me do it. They basically are lifting me up. So I think there can be external forces and internal. But according to Milarepa, the first guy who left any written account, he said, well, I started flying in my dreams. And then they became lucid dreams, not about experience, and then it translated into real life. One day I just could do what I could do in my dreams. You can fly in your dreams. And on the other side, that's your natural state. You can do levitation, telepathy, telekinesis. I was doing telekinesis the other day out of body. And I was actually catching things on fire too, which I've never done before. I was being a fire starter.
That's cool.
It was cool. Different.
Oh yeah, I love it.
I wake up and I can't do it. I just can't do it.
I love it.
Keep trying.
Tell us about another chapter in your book. What else are you covering? Besides anal probe, I have to say it because everybody says, how can you not laugh? I can laugh every single time.
Well, I did one on what I would call UFO swarms.
Oh,
okay. Let me pull up a photograph for you.
Yes.
All these cases where people have seen not one or two UFOs or three or four,
Right.
like a bunch. And there's this one case from Farmington, New Mexico, where UFOs showed up in huge numbers. Not 100 or 200, but like more. And they flew around constantly. There it is. And here, let me first say what date this was. Oh, yeah. March 17, 1950.
Okay.
Skies of Farmington, a little town in New Mexico, northern New Mexico, just filled with UFOs. This was during the day. There's like 3,000 people in town, 6,000 outlying areas.
Right.
Traffic stopped naturally. School stopped. And everyone came running out of their businesses and homes. At least half the town saw this. And it went on for about 2 hours. 200, 300 objects darting around.
That's insane.
Can you imagine? There's nothing like this. I found about a half dozen cases.
Right. Right.
And it went on for 2 hours, stopped, came back again. And someone did get a photograph, and here it is.
Wow.
Now, it's not a super great photograph by today's standards.
No, but it's still pretty significant that somebody captured it.
Yeah, because the government folks were saying, no, this is a skyhook balloon that shattered into little bits. And what are you talking about?
Yeah, sure.
Police officers saw this, scientists, the mayor, newspaper reporters, teachers, everybody saw this. And they described it as a metallic craft, which, if you can see this one right here, that looks just like a metallic craft.
Right, it sure does.
You can see the dome.
Yes.
They were coming together and pulling apart, hovering. Some were releasing smaller craft.
Right, right.
So, yeah, I found a bunch of cases. Well, not a bunch. I was hoping to find more.
Yeah.
I had my own case in Topanga Canyon where it was the same darn thing. The sky filled with craft. And I couldn't find a lot of reporting on this.
Right.
So I think there's some important takeaways. In Farmington, it was clearly a display. This was an event which I think was designed to basically let people know we're real. This is undeniable. You know it. This is getting into the newspapers. It did. It generated national headlines.
Right.
It's virtually unknown today. But I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to make it known because it's an important case.
I think that now we would be hard pressed to see anything like that because I think there's so much reverse engineered stuff going on. I don't know that we would be able to tell the difference unless you're really versed in what you're looking for.
Yeah.
I don't think you would have that kind of, crazy experience. Like that's something that just seeing one is something, but seeing like a mass amount of them at one time, that is unheard of.
Yeah, I'm going to pull up another picture here.
Adrian is just saying, how old was that photo? Sorry.
That was 1950, March 17, 1950, St. Patrick's Day.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
But here's one, which is a very famous wood cutting from, 1561, I think it was, Nuremberg, Germany.
Yes, I've seen it before. Yes.
Yeah. And this is another case I found. Yeah, it's old, Middle Ages old.
Yes.
But
yeah, that's craziness.
Super interesting because there was a written accounts of this as well, and it's memorialized in this. Basically, it's a wood print, and if you look there, you can see this little thing crashing to the ground. Even. Yes,
it's it's interesting that somebody took the time to put this together.
Yeah.
To document it way back then.
And how many? So this is a daylight encounter.
Yes. Yes. Like how many times has this happened in ancient times that where maybe it wasn't documented? Who knows? Yeah. Maybe it was like an everyday occurrence.
Well, there was another one that was just a couple of years later. Here it is.
Wow.
This is in Sweden.
Right. Look at that.
1566, Basel, Sweden.
Right.
Again, pretty well documented.
Yes.
And remember, there was no writing back then. No, people didn't go to schools. Literacy was almost non-existent except among priests and some of the royalty and scientists here and there.
Right.
But most people did not read or write.
Right. That's true.
There weren't public schools.
Mhm.
So most of the stuff just wasn't recorded.
No, exactly. Or they would do it via images, you know.
Yep.
So
Yep, exactly.
it
So
is
makes you
so
wonder.
interesting. It is so interesting. Have you ever done research on the sky ships? And not ships the way you see them, but ships. There were reports that have gone back, to the Middle Ages about flying actual, like galleons, and
Oh yeah.
people would be just dropping down. They would just drop down on ladders, and you could hear, you could just hear this thing just sailing in with normal sails.
Yeah,
It's almost steampunkish.
There's some weird accounts of this. People seeing buildings in the sky. Even I think some of this is interdimensional. I think some of this is probably what we call superior mirage.
Yes.
Because I mean, there's some really convincing mirages that, under very rare weather conditions, can basically put stuff right up into the sky.
Right.
And you're seeing a perfect image of it. But no, I mean, there was a really famous case, which was clearly not that. Because it was different. It was a different buildings. It was not of that time period.
Right.
That's some really weird stuff going on.
It is really fascinating stuff. Like this, one of these instances with the sky ship, they dropped this anchor and it got caught on a church door.
I know that case. Yeah.
Do you know it? Where the people are swarming and the guy's trying to climb back up and unhook the anchor.
There was a lot of that going on in the airship wave of the 1890s to about 1910.
Yeah. But this is like Middle Ages.
Yeah. There was a huge wave.
Yeah.
At that time, which was kind of ushered in the modern age of UFOs. Sort of. It was well before it, but in that Galisteo Junction in New Mexico, there was a teacup or some stuff came out of that ship, and it was basically scooped up by a collector.
Right. No, I'm just acknowledging the comment because maybe ETs were having to appear in a more familiar way to them at the time. It's very possible. My mother used to hear something all the time in the house in and around the same time. I said, it's got to be residual. I know if there was something up the house. But she sent me a recording of it. Do you know what it sounded like? Have you ever heard like rope, like rigging on an old ship and it just twists and rubs against the wood? That's exactly what it was.
Wow.
And she says, no, it's in the corner somewhere in here. She would always hear it around this one specific corner of the house. I'm just like, this doesn't make any sense. I've never heard this. It's like some dimensional thing. So, you remote view it. It's like, yeah, it's a ship.
There was a very famous spot in England called Hangman's Noose.
Right.
A lady I interviewed went there to visit her uncle, and he didn't tell her there was a ghost in the house. Freaked her out when it happened. And he's like, honey, ghosts are the order of the day here in England. Let me take you to Hangman's Noose, and you'll hear it.
Right.
And they sat down late at night, and you could hear this horse come galloping up, and this guy get hung.
Right.
You hear the noose and the snap and the whole ordeal. And she's like, okay, I've heard it. Oh no.
Isn't it great though?
It's wild. There was another lady I interviewed who kept hearing rap music, but it wasn't. In her neighborhood. And she's like, are you guys hearing this? And I'm like, yeah. And they would try to find it and they never could. It was kind of ethereal, and they'd walk around and it would, kind of move around.
Right.
And finally, she did her research. This was a huge Native American settlement, and they would do Indian drumming. They had the drums there. And as soon as she researched it and listened to it again, she's like, that's Native American. That's residual haunting of Native Americans doing their music.
Right.
Really cool.
It is really cool. I love it. I love it.
I've experienced that. I was in the office once, got to work late alone. This is in Canoga Park. And I'm like, who's here? There's somebody talking in the other room. And I know that, I'm alone in the building.
Right.
or this large office. There might have been other people in the building, but I don't think so. Because I was working late. I jumped up and I ran. I'm like, nope. And so I sat down there and I could hear people talking.
Right.
And it was just below the level where I could understand the words. And I would kind of get, but I could hear like a man and a woman. I'm like, this is not me freaking out. This is not my imagination. I'm hearing people talking.
Right.
And I ended up talking to everyone in the office, because there was 20, 30 people I worked with.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, there's a ghost in the bathroom. It flushed the toilet on me. I saw it in the mirror.
Right.
All the girls were complaining about this ghost in the bathroom. They're like, I'm not in that bathroom anymore. There's this ghost and he's creepy.
Right. Ghosts are the last thing we all need to worry about. So Dolly, ET craft are like cuttlefish. They can make you see them any way they want. Yes, I would agree with that. I
think also there's something else going on, because if in these ancient cultures, they weren't thinking ETs. When they see something in the sky, they're like, well, it's got to be a ship, because that's the only thing that we had at that time. We have something called a belief system. And no matter what you're looking at in this world, you're looking at it through the lens of your belief system. Right. It's really hard for people sometimes to see past. If it's out of your worldview, you might not even see it. You will deliberately ignore it. I've talked to people who were there at an encounter, and they're like, well, no, I didn't want to look at it, or I didn't see it that way. I saw it this way.
Right.
So this is a problem, and I think it can lead to some confusion on what people are seeing. The Romans called them flying shields, because they were shaped like shields. And like, well, look at that shield up there. Right.
It's funny though, like just like the ancient people just seem to be, I think, much more relaxed about it. I mean, it's a bit of an assumption, but I mean, just look at all of these ancient monuments. You can go into some of the Egyptian tombs and find modern day things, and you could see, the graves and the eyes, and you could see they have all kinds of different out of place artifacts, things that just don't seem right. But I mean, they're put in really significant places. The tomb of King Seti, had helicopters and had UFOs and saucers, and like, this is in the tomb of a king. He's documenting this.
I wish we had more writing on this. The Library of Alexandria.
Get me started on that, Preston.
Oh gosh, it's infuriating, because that probably could have had some real reporting on some of this stuff.
Yes.
And that's why I think they did it in stone, because like, this is going to remain.
Yes. Yes. And monuments.
I honestly think that there was open official contact.
Yes.
In our far prehistory, pre-recorded past.
I would agree, because they documented this stuff, and they were very good at documenting it. So can you imagine, what? I mean, if you look at just some of, you're looking at some of these hieroglyphs or petroglyphs again, or out of place artifact, ancient monuments that just seem like, how the heck would they have done this? How could they have built this? In the end, that was very significant to the ancient people, and they put it out there. I can't even imagine what the Library of Alexandria had. But if you go to Tibet, has a hidden library. That they found this ancient library in Romania. These libraries still exist,
and they're filled with stuff that hasn't been translated.
No. Can you imagine?
I bet there's like little tiny, churches and stuff that have an underground room that's filled with all the ancient manuscripts. I love library. As a kid, I'd be like, let's go to the bookstore.
I know. I would be all over that. Even now, I would be just like a kid in a candy store with a place like that, because honestly, there are places like this that are surfacing that have been well hidden from the world.
Well, the good news is they're preserved on the other side.
Yes.
Nothing is actually lost forever.
Right.
Everything is recorded somewhere.
Yes.
In the Akashic Library. It's my favorite library.
Yes, exactly. Well, thankfully there is that. So that we'll just have to tap into it, and it is there. So I just want to, before we finish up, No, not this one. Sorry, Lady Spider Witch. I do love your little winky face. ET visitation, paranormal activity simulated somehow. Absolutely 100%. I agree with that.
Yeah, I think we've been talking quite a bit about this. People are trying to link them to as the same phenomena. I don't think so. But I think when someone has contact, they start experiencing all these paranormal stuff. And it's a two-way street. ETs love it when people are psychic and they're very interested in contacting them and working with that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, Bigfoot and UFO encounters, they come together. Levitation, all these, out-of-body experiences. A simple sighting can trigger you to start having astral projection. Got several cases of that.
Right.
And it's just kind of like your belief system has gotten, an awakening. You're suddenly thinking a little bit out of the box, and that can send you on a spiritual quest. Lots of near-death experiencers start having contact. There's weird connections going on here.
Right. I agree. We're in for a bit of a fascinating ride, I think. So tell us again, the book. Where can we find it? What do you have coming up?
Again, there it is.
Let me take this down. 1 second. It's blocking the way. There we go. There, beautiful.
I love that cover. Thank you, Christy. Not From Here, Volume 5, available at Amazon, other online retailers. You can go to my website, of course, and read excerpts on this, prestondennett.weebly.com.
Yes. We've had that going through the whole stream. So
talking about on my show with Dolly Saffron, The Light Gate.
Yes.
Airs each Monday evening.
Yes. 9 p.m. Oh, 6 p.m. You're in Pacific time. I know you're on Pacific time in the brain.
But it's still, I still kind of think that way. 9 p.m. Eastern.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got my YouTube channel where I'm putting out my research for those who don't want to read books.
Right.
And my books are going on Audible as fast as I can get them there with publishers that will let me do it. So no.
Yes. So lots coming up. Are you writing Symmetry?
Symmetry too.
Is this the next book that is coming out?
Probably.
Before any other books?
Probably. I'm working on another out-of-body book. And I have another, I've got several irons in the fire, but Symmetry is taking priority.
Yes.
Because I feel like it's time. And I just gotta, how Facebook gives you reminders. Like 2 years ago, you were doing this. Well, Symmetry came out, it hit #1. I looked to see where it is. It's like number 80. It's bouncing around still on the top bestseller list.
I love it.
So I'm like, wow.
As it should.
And Not From Here, Volume 5. Yay, reached #1.
Woo! Congratulations.
So excited.
Wow.
How cool is that?
I love it.
#1 in the UFO subject, not overall. So trust me, it's still like the 200,000 or 20,000 down the list.
That is awesome, though. But a lot of your books do that. A lot of your books do that. Yeah. That says a lot. I love your whole approach on things. I love that it's just very, it's just very laid back and lighthearted, because there's a lot of fear out there when it comes to ET, and there's going to be a lot more coming. So anybody who's feeling fearful, go pick up one of Preston's books or get on his YouTube channel, listen to the radio
show. Just laying out the facts. So exactly. In an accessible, readable way.
Right.
I'm not trying to push an agenda of any kind.
Right.
I'm really, really trying hard to just put out the facts, because there's so much disinformation out there.
Lots of it, unfortunately. We're already at the top of the hour. Guys, I want to thank you all for being in the chat room. You guys just make it that much more fun. It's always nice to have, audience participation. Big thank you to you, Preston. I love, just interacting and listening to all of your stories, because there's so many amazing stories. So guys, go check out the YouTube page, because you put them out every Friday?
That's right. Yep. Each Friday evening, a new episode. I try. I've missed a day here or there.
Yeah. Well, it happens. We'll let it go.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So next Wednesday night, guys, we're having our monthly open mic night. So You know, you asked, here it is. Yeah, we're handing it out there. And Thursday night, we welcome for the very first time Britt Elders, who's going to be discussing her books, UFO Contact from the Pleiades, Volume 1 and 2. So this is apparently the 45th anniversary of all of this research, and it's going to be a fabulous show. So I hope you guys can all tune in.
I know who she is. She's a pioneer.
Yep. She's a pioneer. I know. So we're very excited to have her, and you know, yay. So everybody, good night. Have a fantastic weekend. We shall see you next week. Thank you all for tuning in.